Welcome to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. We feature top entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world, those who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective to their life and business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, David Nilsson here. I'm the host of this podcast. On the Future is Borderless, we talk to business leaders who embody what I call a borderless mindset. And we delve into innovative ideas, best practices, and explore how these insights can be applied both in our personal and professional life. And ultimately, the goal here is to help people thrive in a rapidly changing world. All right. Well, I'm excited for the show today. Today, we're joined by Tom Spadea, who is a franchise lawyer from Philadelphia with a unique blend of corporate and entrepreneurial and legal expertise. Tom, who is actually recognized as a legal eagle by Franchise Times, has been guiding founders of franchise organizations and leading them towards pretty significant wealth creation. You've got a background spanning co-owning a communications equipment manufacturer to roles in national franchise concepts. So Tom has got this, I would say, this entrepreneurial spirit that you don't often see in legal professionals. And I'll also note that his legal acumen combined with his real world business experience makes him a really valuable advisor to franchisors. Tom, welcome to the Future is Borderless.
Thanks for having me, David. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, this will be fun. Now, full disclosure to our audience, I've known Tom for a long time through the franchising industry. Many of you that follow this podcast know that I was a co-founder of a company called Guidant Financial, which still today is one of the leading franchise financing firms in the entire country. And we've had a chance to collaborate with many mutual clients in the past. But I'm excited for today's conversation because we launched Doxa, I should say, launched Franchise Talent, which you've been helpful in us refining this program over time. And the idea behind Franchise Talent was to help franchise systems redefine how they scale by embracing remote work, integrating global talent into their hiring practices, and then helping them create more opportunities for their workers domestically by going offshore. And so many of the franchisors know that this is sort of the way of the future, but have either had a poor experience or really don't know where to start. So today I'm hoping that we'll just dig into your own story and talk about sort of how you've embraced some of these concepts and some of your clients have as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, well, let's just jump in. So maybe you could just start with sharing a little bit about your franchise journey. For those of you that aren't familiar with who you are, talk about how you became a franchise lawyer and sort of what you do working with them side by side.
Yeah. So I, as you said, I've had my law firm for 12 years now. And prior to that, but I've been in the franchising world for over 20. So I started in franchise sales, not as an attorney, actually. I went to law school in my mid 30s. And I did that while I was selling franchises during the day. So I worked for a couple of large brands, Rita's Water Ice. I was the head of franchise sales. They'd been bought by private equity. I helped grow them from a little over 300 units to over 500 units. Learned so much. The IFA, got my CFE. And while I did that, God bless my wife, she was patient enough to see it through while I was going to law school at night. So got my law degree. In the beginning, started representing franchisees and slowly pivoted towards a franchisor regulatory practice with where we are today. And our kind of role in this, and I appreciate that, that recognition of the fact that I've sat in those shoes. I've sat in those board meetings. I've been on franchisors. I've gone through the business side of the due diligence with private equity acquiring these firms. And we kind of take all of that to are mostly founders. I mean, I would say our kind of key sweet spot is people who have an independent business that want to become franchisors. And so we give them the legal framework and the document. That's why, as we'll talk about today, I'm so excited with what you've put together with Doxa, because it's a marrying of what someone needs to do as a franchisor to support their franchisees efficiently while they grow that brand. And so, I joke that I don't go really wide, but I'm really, really deep in the franchising space, and I drill pretty deep. So, and it's a fun business. And now we represent close to 300 brands nationwide.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, we are going to talk about global talent, how it applies to franchisors, but maybe we could start with your own journey, just to sort of set the stage. And I think it'd be great if you could sort of share how you made the decision to start integrating global talent into your operations and maybe the sort of moment that sparked that decision.
So it's something I've really thought about for a while. And I know that you see other, companies and other small companies use, and you hear all these horror stories. And I had a couple friends of mine that were, using, and then it didn't work. And they were like, fractional and all these pieces of it. And then you and I had a conversation. I'm sure you remember, I think it was in San Diego at the IFA, just,
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
a year and a half ago. And hey, David, what's up? It's great. Post COVID. Oh my God, I'm seeing live human beings. And and you were telling me about this, and I started thinking about some of my issues of not having an executive system, being buttoned up, the pile of stuff on my desk never gets done. My billing department, we had someone leave. We're like, well, we're going to replace it, but what? And then we just started talking, and it's a trust transfer, right? Like, I've known you for over a decade, and I trust you, and you tell me that what you've been doing. I said, you know what? I'll throw my hat in the ring. And I think we started with one person, and it just has we've slowly just evolved it. So it really was just knowing that this is something I need to deal with at some point, and I'd love to start. But people come up to me in trade shows. Oh, you should do this. You get all these emails. You get this on LinkedIn, but that's not, unless you know the human and you know the people. And that, I guess I'm very old school about that, right? It's, you got to have trust of the process, and the people. And man, I mean, obviously I'm on the podcast. I've never looked back. I have bought into it wholeheartedly. And it's been a game changer, not just for us, but for the clients that we've now introduced into the process, who have had and picked up global talent. So it's been great.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. The goal for us has always been to make it easy for people to sort of engage, right? And I appreciate that our conversation had an impact and that we've been able to help you. But maybe for our listeners, you could talk about, though, how did you get started? You said you started with one, which is true. And how did you determine which role to start with, and then how did you expand over time?
Well, with your help, and then as Nicole, who is also a place is instead of trying to just, duplicate a job title that was a US based job title, we were a lot more thoughtful, kind of with your guidance, of trying to pull tasks from other folks around the organization. And so we weren't saying, okay, I just want an accounting manager, and I'm just going to dump all this onto accounting. No, we said, well, the two people in our accounting department are working nights and weekends to keep up with the process. So what if we could take some of the back office stuff off of their plate? And then I started thinking about, like, one of my favorite things that I do. And Eileen, I mean, it's made my efficiency a killer. Is I blind copy her on every email that's related to someone who wants to franchise their business, and she'll set up a Zoom call. She'll do research on them. She'll make me more effective so that I can have a little bit more space and breathing room to have that conversation with these prospective franchisees without worrying about, or franchisors so what we did was we started breaking down the tasks and started saying, look, is this something that, and COVID really taught us. I mean, we have people on our team in Florida and in New York and in different states. And so, like a lot of companies, so between Zoom and between software, so we started taking these tasks, and the roles naturally developed as we did that. And it's not been a replacement of our domestic team. It's been a force multiplier to our domestic team. So that's how we did it. The roles were really based on how could we, if I have 4 people doing in one group, or the 2 people in accounting, and I can add 1 or 2 Doxa team members into that team, well, then, that's another 40 hours a week per person. It just multiplies the effectiveness of that team by getting stuff off their plate. And that's the approach that we've taken. And
yeah, man, I want to throw just a pin on a couple of things you said. First is, COVID actually demonstrated, I should say, accelerated a trend that was already happening, right? This idea of a remote work. And what it did is it forced all of us to really embrace it for a period of time. And now there's this really interesting tension where some people are trying to pull back on that. And in my opinion, that ship has already sailed. And so, if we believe remote work is here to stay, then the question is, do you need to have people within a geographic proximity in order to deliver on your services? And for many, many companies, that is in fact not the case. And so that just opens up opportunity to look at geographies, both in the US and in new international pools. So I think that's a really important component of that. The other that you brought up sort of indirectly is the fact that going offshore actually is not a cost-cutting exercise. I guess technically it could be, but the way that we try to support is by helping growth companies increase their capacity, scale faster, and allow their executives to spend time on the highest, best use of their energy. And that is something that you sort of well articulated.
Yeah, I mean, it enables us to actually pay our domestic team members more because they're now more effective. So the margins that they're able to generate in their 40 to 50 hours a week are actually higher value to the company because you have this blended cost of the whole department comes down, and the leaders in that department can be paid more. And that's panning out.
I love it. I always tell people that, in my previous business, so Guidant Financial, we actually developed a really great offshore capability, which is what led to us starting Doxa. And I think that from what I learned was that by going offshore, we could create more opportunity onshore. And that's what you're sharing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I want to talk about culture for a second, because culture is so important to every organization. When you start to blend international cultures, that's something that many companies don't feel prepared for or don't really think about in advance. And so can you talk a little bit about what you learned about sort of blending those cultures to make sure that the team members that you're inviting to your organization sort of really understood your culture and could sort of help build upon that?
Yeah, I mean, because we looked, I think it's just making that leap to say, these are team members. For the people that, we've placed, or say like our accounting team, it's like they are, or Eileen, my executive assistant. I mean, she has a spadealaw.com email. She's on our monthly, all hands on deck meeting. They're part of our team. They're not this outsourced service. And so I think it's really a mindset. And so when you do that, you want to pull them into being part of really your extended family. So whatever you're trying to, explain as part of your culture of the firm, they have to be a part of it. And that's where I think really what you've done, David, at Doxa is superior to saying a lot of these people who are treating it, it's the difference between having a driver that's with you and hiring Uber, where you don't know what you're going to get from drive to drive. And so that's a massive difference, so that this person is integrated, understands you. Look, it's a little harder when people are further away to train. You're not in person. So you have to recognize that if you have someone showing up in your office, the first month, you got to be realistic about the direct contribution. You have to train. So what we found is that our team members at Doxa are hungry for this long-term relationship. So we're taking the time to say, look, we're going to train and teach and know that, and I think that's where people really fell short, is they were looking at it purely cost basis. Per dollar, per hour, I'm going to give you a bunch of these tasks, as opposed to saying, this is a monthly investment I'm making in my business process. And so maybe the first couple of months is going to be a little bit painful, but anybody who's been a leader or a coach or a teacher knows that when you delegate tasks, the first time it takes you twice as much time. It actually takes you longer in the beginning. And then it goes to like 1.8, then 1.5. Eventually you get below 1, and eventually you get maybe into the 0.2, and that's where it pays dividends. So if you're not patient and you're not making that, the reason I answer, I guess, that with the culture question is that you have to be very intentional to say, these are team members. I want them here for years. I want to know who they are, because the way your process worked, we actually got to interview them. We saw resumes. These were human beings, not tasks. We weren't outsourcing tasks. We were recruiting talent. And that's a big, big difference.
Huge difference. In fact, it's funny, when I first started looking at the outsourcing industry in 2014, 2015, that's what I found, is this huge gap between, there are lots of large scale business process outsourcing groups who will, take over a high volume of repeatable tasks, but it's very transactional in nature. And then there's these, mom and pop VA companies that say that they'll get you a virtual assistant and they'll do everything from your accounting to your graphic design and your dry cleaning somehow. But we really wanted skilled workers. And so finding the right talent and putting them in the right seat, and then actually nurturing them as if we, did with our domestic teams, was really critical to making sure that we got the most out of that relationship. And to your point, it's a relationship, not a transaction. Let's talk about your domestic team though. So when you first told them, you said a minute ago that you've been able to pay a little bit better as a result of some of the efficiencies. But take me back to that moment where you first told the team, "Hey, we're thinking of bringing an offshore team member on." And as you've expanded now, how has it also impacted those team members beyond comp?
Look, there certainly always is anxiety when you start having that conversation, right? And people get that. So I think you just have to be, I mean, we have a pretty good culture, I think, of transparency and honesty and also change. Anybody who knows me knows that I like to just kind of, let's figure out a problem and look at it different ways. But one of the things I think that's been a benefit that we didn't really think about in the beginning is that for some of our, take people in the accounting department, they're not really big delegators, right? They're task-oriented folks. So our team members we've spent some coaching on them to teach them to be the next generation of the company leaders. And now they have someone reporting to them directly that they've maybe worked 15 years in their whole career and they've never actually been in a leadership role. And some of them are really thriving because now they're getting to say, oh, wait, we still get that question. Oh, can I ask them to do that? Yeah, of course. This is like, if they can do it and you have the quality and you have the controls, this is something so that you can be more client facing, you can spend more time. And so it's really helped our team members grow, not just from an efficiency standpoint, but from an actual, they're developing relationships. We love getting that, like, oh my God, they're rock stars when we hear that. And it's like, yeah, they're rock stars. But the reality is, when the players are rock stars, because the teachers are rock star and the coaches are rock star. And that's what my domestic team are becoming better coaches and leaders, which just make them better and more effective at their job.
Yeah, love it. You at the beginning talked a little bit about how some of your clients have embraced this strategy as well. Could you talk about maybe a success story or particular instance where you've seen integrating global talent to really benefit the company, whether it's yours or one of your clients?
So, why I think franchising is such a terrific vertical for this is that for the most part, if you're a franchise company, you're out of your core business and you're now licensing your intellectual property and teaching people to use your brand, theoretically across the country. So right out of the gate, you're creating something that is borderless, that is, intellectual, that is, goes far away from your home city where you're not, putting someone's roof on or making them a burger. You're teaching someone how to do that across state. And you're also doing it with a reasonably small and efficient team. I was at Rita's and we had 500 units. And I don't know, we were 25 people, maybe. Like, franchisors are not huge organizations by their very nature. You're a licensing business. So that's like the backstory of why this is such impact, because there's always more to do. There's always more things to do. So I have a friend of mine and he's in a home service business. And, he's like a lot of our clients and a lot of entrepreneurs, do everything yourself. And his daughter was the one who was saying, like, you really got to fix your social media. Like, you're posting all this stuff yourself. And like, sometimes the pictures aren't right and everything. So he ended up, through this process, getting a social media manager, dialed in, art mindset. I mean, the skill set, I think, of who he's placed is probably on par with like a director of marketing here domestically. And all of a sudden, just like, oh, we need videos. Oh, we need this. Oh, and he's telling me, yeah, he just went and scrubbed all my competitors and said, look at all the stuff that they're doing. We need to do this. And I said, so what's your daughter think? Oh, she said that was the best thing he ever did. So, an entrepreneur who's getting yelled at by his daughter because he's taking and doing all this stuff himself, because that's how franchise founders, entrepreneurs, look, you and I as founders, when you're bootstrapping, you're doing everything yourself. And you 100%. Just can't afford someone at 80 or 90 or 100 grand a year. But this becomes that middle ground where you can get the work done by someone whose sole focus is to handle that piece. And so that's one of many stories of our clients who we're introducing this to and saying, look, you have a lot of stuff to do in a lot of different areas. Start breaking it down. And then another successful story is we have people who've placed, and I think they're now up to like 4 people within a year, because they also realize the scalability of it. That's the other really secret. That's the other piece of why I think the franchise, global talent approach is so strong, is because franchisors by their very nature are borderless and by their very nature are scalable engines. So if all of a sudden a franchisor can figure this out and then they triple their franchise count in the next 2 years, they've tripled the amount of tasks that need to be done. And if they've put this in place, I would say that your recruitment process with your culture testing and the resumes and the screening and the training and the, hey, they need to be fluent on this CRM, and you'll do that training in that back office. That enables a franchisor to focus on what they do right, and they can just spin the plates up. They can just say, hey, you know what? We had 2 people in this role. We need 6 now. And that's what Doxa is going to do best.
Yeah, it's so funny that you bring that up. I've told a lot of people this. I believe with franchising, especially growth brands, right? Oftentimes they are, because the margins are not massive initially. When you're in growth phase, you consume a lot of capital, and so a lot of franchisors I've seen historically are investing behind of the growth curve versus ahead of it. And I think this is a secret sauce for people to sort of skip ahead and be able to create that capacity before it impacts service level.
Look, so. I would say you're being even too kind to say that the margins aren't massive in the beginning. If a franchisor is doing it right, the margins are non-existent in the beginning. I mean, a franchisor who's founding, you're totally right. And if they don't invest ahead of the growth curve, that's why franchising is a tough game. Anybody who knows, who's come through me, if I have clients on here who are watching, they know I tried to scare them and talk them out of doing it because it's a tough game. And, you have to know that for the first 3 years, even though it sounds, oh, they're going to pay me $40,000 on a franchise fee, I'm going to get these 7% royalties. If you're doing it right, the brands I know, we probably had 12 brands exit to private equity in the last year and a half. They were not making a lot of money in those first couple of years because they were reinvesting. And this is a way to really deploy that limited bit of cash flow and capital to build the infrastructure. If you have happy franchisees and they're making money, good things will start to happen, but you got to be patient. So yeah, no, I right on point.
Love it. Let's talk. A minute ago, you talked about, hey, look, offshores, working with offshore talent or even remote talent. Let's just level it up. Remote talent is more difficult than in office. And in office, hey, if I hire a new person, I can say, hey, sit by Tom for the next 2 weeks, learn the job, you'll be great, right? We pick it up through osmosis. It's a little bit of a sloppy way to onboard. And I think a lot of companies are used to that. When you go to the remote environment, you have to be a little bit more prescriptive about how you onboard people and train them. And then there's the ongoing maintenance, right? How you collaborate, how you manage. And I'm curious, like, what tools or practices have you found be sort of the most effective in managing that remote/global experience?
Well, we got off the free 40-minute max Zoom, and and on the end we no, I would say that you have to be intentional about it. Very similar to a franchisor training franchisees and recognizing that, look, they're not gonna learn it themselves. You can't just throw them in the deep end of the pool like you might do. So it makes you more intentional. It makes you document, and it makes you create this good feedback loop of a cadence. And so what we've done, I would say that we've looked at it as a long-term strategy. And now what we've started doing, so regular meetings, first of all. Zoom, regular meetings, and document and empowering your team to say, hey, you have to have feedback, and also empowering your team to not get frustrated if the first couple results don't come as expected, to say, look, we're making this investment, and at the end of the day, this is something that's a little bit different. So there's a lot of benefits, but then there's, going to be more stress and cost associated with something that's better, like everything in life, right? Everything, there's always trade-offs. So I think the being intentional. And then the other thing that we've tried to do is we've tried to create a sort of mini culture within our own Doxa team members. So we then tell them, like, for instance, my assistant, Eileen, who I've been now giving more tasks to, and now she's learning our business. She's been with us now a year and a half. So as she learns our business, we say, okay, well, what are some of the things that are now becoming routine to Eileen? If we can bring in another assistant, maybe Eileen can push some of her tasks into this team member, and then I can give her even more high value stuff that I never would have given off the bat. She didn't know how I worked and how. So I think it's having a path for people is really important.
Man, that's something you guys have done really, really well. I think if you look historically at outsourcing, it's people have thought about it as take the work that I don't want to do or pay for in the US and send it off to a low cost geography. But in that sort of mode where it's transactional, high turnover, the costs of onboarding and offboarding is really high. To your point, building a relationship, thinking about that individual and their career path within your organization drives huge loyalty and efficiency. And then I just want to underscore what you said a minute ago about there is decreased efficiency initially whenever you're trying to delegate a task, because it takes you a lot of time to sort of teach someone to do it well. But if you make that investment, it pays its dividends really significantly over the long haul. I know we've been going for over a half hour. I do want to just kind of wrap with a couple of quick questions though, Tom. And the first one is really around, in this industry, for whatever reason, global talent has not really been a big cornerstone of what I would call a franchisor's growth strategy. So based on your own experience, what advice would you give a franchisor who's looking at this as an option for them in their own operation?
That their competitors are going to do it. Everybody is moving in this direction. I think franchising, I did a podcast or as an article a while back about how I see the trend over the last couple of years is franchising is getting professionalized. Private equity's coming in, money's coming in, you're getting these platform plays. So, there's still a whole lot of founders and smaller brands, but I will tell you, everything is getting professionalized. And franchising, probably because it is primarily, the meat and potatoes of the franchise industry or mom and pop hustlers who just started it. Franchising always has been pretty lagging behind technology, behind trends, because it's really a people business. So yeah. I would say that it is exploding now. And this is one of those tools that you look in other industries, you look in other places where you have business processes happening and rinse and repeat. The offshore talent is something that is accelerating. And so it hasn't really fully happened in franchising, but for sure over the next few years, it's going to be. And so there's going to be this expectation, because if your competitors are doing this and you have this many hours available to support your franchisees and they're paying you so much, you need to be there or your system is going to start falling behind.
Yeah. Either people are going to lead or they're going to lag. And that's the choice they have. Awesome. Well, we'll leave it there. We've been talking to Tom Spadea, who is a franchise lawyer. Tom, where can people go to learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah. So, our website, SPADEALAW, SpadeaLaw.com. You can shoot me an email, find me on LinkedIn, and not just, franchise lawyer. If someone wants to talk about this from my experience with Doxa, or how we've sort of leveraged this, how our clients, I'd be happy to connect offline. So just drop me an email, tspadea at SpadeaLaw.com is my email. But yeah, no, I love talking about this stuff, and I will be, I do a lot of these trade shows also. So if you've seen this and you're in the industry and you see me, come up and talk to me about it. Happy to help. Happy to share.
Yeah, I think that's great. And my assumption is there's a lot of people that are contemplating this, but just there's that sort of insecurity that they need to overcome. So if you're willing to have a conversation, that'd be great. And we'll certainly put your information in the show notes here in case somebody wants to reach out. But thanks again for your time. I appreciate you being on the show today.
You bet. Thanks, David.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. Be sure to click subscribe to future episodes so you can hear from more top entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And we'll see you again next time.